Computer. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Grant Cameron, and I want to welcome you to another interview I'm doing, an exciting interview today. Um, Thanks for taking your time. And my guest today is Melinda Leslie, and I've talked to Melinda a number of times, and she's got some exclusive news to talk to us about. And I'm joined today by Nicole Sakic, Nikki, and Nikki is helps me out on research, brings me different witnesses, and does a lot of research for me in the background, stuff that I really don't have time to read, or she's on the boards and stuff which I don't do. So welcome, Nikki, and welcome, Melinda.
Hi,
Hello,
thanks for
everybody.
having me. Hi, Nikki, nice to meet you.
It's so wonderful to finally meet you too, Melinda. I kind of follow you on Facebook and we
Oh
chat every
gosh,
once in a
wow.
while. I comment every once in a while and you always comment back, and that's great. And I
Oh,
support,
okay, great. Yeah,
I try to
now
support
now I
everything you do.
realize who it is, and I'm putting the name and the face together. I love that. You know, we
Dude,
we
that's
we make these
me.
friends and know these people on Facebook. And then don't know what they
Right.
look like. So it's great.
Hey, and that's I've been around for a long time. I'm just not usually one of those big mouths on Facebook. I'm just
Gotcha.
Like us, not
one
like
Sorry,
us,
I
Melinda.
hit my mic. Am I sound good? I hit my mic there.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
it sounds good.
let's start with a question about that. I mean, Melinda, you and I have had this discussion. We've had it many times about the place of women in ufology. That women really aren't.
Oh,
And I try to encourage young people. I actually named the young guns, and I tried to help them as much as I can, and I try to help. But when it comes to helping women, there seems to be a backlash in terms of they don't really deserve to be in this game. And I especially with the consciousness thing, you see guys aren't really into consciousness; they're into the nuts and bolts things, and there seems to be a backlash. So, can you and Nicole talk about your experience in this? Is this true, or is this an illusion?
well, first off, I know a lot of guys into the consciousness stuff, so
Mhm.
um, I don't know if someone really did stats on men versus women in there, because I know a lot of guys into it, and I know a lot of women in ufology. There's a women in ufology Facebook page that's got, I don't know how many names now, like 200 or something. But it's like, okay, there's actually a lot of us, and you could say, yeah, we're not given the attention. I mean, I think all women out there in the field will go, yeah, we're not, but at the same time, how much are we speaking up and getting known? I appreciate, Grant, you giving me the ability to be on that panel yesterday, because, I spoke up to you, and said, I have something to say. Um, and you knew that because you were familiar with my research, but I thought, okay, maybe it's my fault that I'm not getting out there sharing what I know. Now, part of it is because I'm busy, so part of me, I can say, well, that's no fault of ufology. So I encourage women to say, speak up, jump into the conversation. I had friends texting me yesterday during our panel saying, jump in. Well, I thought I had plenty of airtime, plenty, and everybody gave me more than enough, and I was trying to be concise and not long-winded, because like Grant, you talk fast, I talk a lot. I admit that. So but and to be fair to everyone, but I felt I was given plenty of time. But it took my standing up and standing for what I research. So I encourage women to do that. I mean, Lord knows, I think people will say Linda Moulton Howe's enough FaceTime, Linda Moulton Howe's,
Yeah.
paid attention to. Kathleen Martin is being paid attention to, etc. But I'm like, okay, I mean, there's others, so it's, but can you say there's a disproportionate amount of women to men who are getting the attention? Yeah. Now, is it that we're doing less research, or maybe not? Are we less vocal? Yes. So that's why I'm saying, part of it's our fault. We need to speak up. Women, you need to speak up. Say, I have a voice that needs to be heard.
Okay, so Nicole, she says you got
Nicole,
to
what's Nicole? Yeah, please,
speak
Nicole,
up.
you share.
Oh no, you said an hour and a half, Grant? No, I'm teasing. You know, every woman I talk to in this field, I think we all hear the same kind of questions over and over again. And I often get asked, why aren't there more women in ufology? Why aren't there more women? And my kind of quick response to that, it goes along with what you said. You're just not looking hard enough. You know, we're there. We're there. It might be, you know, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and you can read statistics on your members and things like that. And honestly, the statistics that I see across the board, at least in social media, is there's 70% men and there's 30% women. So there's 30% women out there, and we're there. We're doing research. I think women have a brighter or a broader scope of research that they take on. So they're often not pigeonholed in one certain case or one area of ufology. So when you're working on so many things at once, I think it's hard for a woman to give themselves anything goes kind of platform. You know what I mean? We're kind of put into these lines that everybody draws, you know, of nuts and bolts, experiencer groups, you know, just general interest.
That's right. I mean,
on and on.
Nicole, I'm so glad you say that. And I think that 30% is a fair way to say in the researchers. Now, are 30% of the researchers or the serious researchers women? I think yes. But are 30%, are we getting 30% of the attention? Maybe not, you know, so but again, I think we need to speak up. I think, you know, there's these traditional mindsets of you know, as women, even we have these traditional mindsets of not speaking up, you know, and I think in this field we need, how we're going to get beyond that is to get beyond it, just to start speaking up and let yourself be known, and to carry yourself as a serious researcher. I think you also hit it on the head right then when you said it's too unfocused, too, you know, I mean, as far as we cover many things, I think that's very true. You know, are you known for this or this or this? People get confused with my stuff. Am I the UFO sighting lady person? Yeah. Am I the public abductee? Yeah. Am I the MyLabs researcher? That's the thing I'm most known for. But am I the, what people think of is they think of me as the public abductee or the MyLabs researcher. But what they get lost in is I'm also the working group researcher, which leads me into why I investigate all this stuff. And that's, I've had a research partner and been doing that for 28 of the 30 years I've been in the field. And I've been a public abductee for 30 years. So people are like, well, do we have you on about disclosure? Or, you know, people call and say, I want to interview you. I go, about what? And they go, well, your experiences. I said, well, are you interested in my disclosure stuff or my working group stuff? Because I'd actually rather talk about that much more than my own experiences. You know, it's always hard. That's another thing.
I get in those conversations often about, it's like, oh, I'd love to pick your brain. And it's like, oh, on what? Let me get ready. There's a lot in there. But
yeah, I mean, what, you know, and so, yeah, maybe we're multi-focused, but that doesn't mean we're not very focused. I mean, Grant knows when it comes to the working group stuff, pardon my language, I hope I can say it's Grant, you can edit it out if I can. I know my shit.
Go ahead.
I know my shit. Yeah, we're online. I think I can. But, you know, so, yeah. And,
you do know your
shit.
And so, and that's the reason
thank you. I appreciate that. When it comes to MyLabs and when it comes to the working group, I mean, again, we're talking, I've been in the field for 30 years. I've been doing both of those areas of research for 28. I haven't been sitting around for 28 years. I've done a lot. And anyway, so there you go. This, you know, I don't want to make this about me right now. So, but yeah, I think, you know, any woman listening to this, we just got to speak up. If we're 30% of the community and 30% of the research, we got to be 30% of the voice, and that we have to demand a place at the table.
Yeah, and I think we have to. I think we have to encourage the young people too, because you know, there's the joke that it's like just old people that are in ufology and the young people aren't interested. That's really not true either.
Well, I've been saying, you know, Grant, you know Lori Ann Fenton really well, and her and I were discussing this. You know, be careful what you ask for, because for years ufology said we need young people, we need young people. Well, in the last couple of years, we've been flooded with younger people. Now, that's great, But this is the thing, they got to realize they don't know everything, and they haven't been in the field for 28 years. So, you know, and there's people, I mean, I remember when I was a young person in the community, you know, and so there are people, there are these wise owls of ufology who really know their stuff. And I, you know, I came in at the same time as kind of Dolan. So we're kind of really the, you know, we were once the young people. Now we're like the middle of the road, but and we're very active. Dolan, me, you know, I mean, he, you know, so Grant, but you and him, very active on social media. The older researchers in the community that are even older than us kind of miss that boat. And that's unfortunate because they're not part of the voice. Some are. I mean, you like Bob.
You know, I will add to that.
Last night and stuff on others. So, you know, but.
You got to jump in the call. Otherwise, you're not going to get in.
Well, I was going to add to that. I couldn't tell if it was cutting out or if I was giving too much of a pause, but I'll add to that with saying, once you get, you know, like Grant always says, Nikki follows the boards. You know, that type of following and keeping up with people on their social media, and then becoming a part of that as well with your own shows and podcasts or just Facebook Live. It's a job in and of itself. And I know there's a lot of people out there, women, who go, I would rather focus on my work than getting my face out there because it takes away from my work. And I don't mean just women feel that way, but I hear that from men too. But it is a big thing to do the online social media stuff well. It is another part of your full-time job. So,
well, and Grant knows with yesterday's panel, I wasn't speaking up on what I knew about all that, and I realized that was no one's fault but mine. But again, it's like, hey, I'm also busy working. I'm sure, you know, we all have lives. You know, that's one thing I was talking to Jim about. You know, you know, he had family from out of town, and for like Jim Semivan, but he had family from out of town, and for like 5 days was not following. So even things that To the Stars had posted and knew, he hadn't even seen because, you know, because you know, he had family from out of town over the holiday, and was caught up in that. And then he said, you know, it was very funny. He said, my family has no interest in this. They could care less. They think it's all silly. They look at me and go, are you sure you're not wasting your time? You know, it's funny. We get that from our families, right?
It's good to hear from him.
Yeah, and it was so funny to hear Jim say, look, I had my family here for 5 days. I say, well, I have this and this going on. I'm excited. And they're just like, whatever. You know, he said they could care less.
Now you're talking about Jim Semivan.
Wow,
now you're talking about
crowd, you know.
You're talking about Jim Semivan. Let's get into that, because I'll always know you. People know you as the Millab. I'll always say Melinda is the guy who's the only person who's talking to Jim Semivan. And I will always hold regard. And that's where I think a lot of people go to me like, Melinda? Nah, come on. Like, no. Like, I mean, they would come to me. I mean, why would they not come to me or to Richard Dolan or to somebody like that? And so you are the person, the only person, we'll make this clear, the only person that he is basically talking to. So explain who Jim Semivan is.
Other than the other guys at To the Stars.
Oh yeah, but they're in the club. We're not in the club, but we're in the sort of the.
Well, actually, I'm not the only one. He's certainly speaking with Chris Bledsoe, you know.
No, but I mean, yeah. Well, but that's sort of like a personal thing. He's not really sort of. Chris is not out there putting his message out. He's sort of like there's you're like the what do they call it? Like an in between them, the publicity where they want something out, they'll come. They know that you'll put it out properly and they can trust you, and so you got picked. Whereas, you know, like you get other people who may have been picked, like some of the people were talking to Eric Davis and some of the people were talking to Hal Puthoff, and everybody had their little niche. Or Nolan was talking to certain people, but you had this one. So I'll always hold you in regard. So describe who Jim Semivan is, why this guy is so important, and when you first met him.
It's so funny that you were just saying all that on the heels of us talking about women in the field, to say why he's talking to me and stuff. Well, first off, we met and became friends, but I could just be having conversations with him and never make a point to stick my neck out and get online or put something in we were in this private 8-page room, you know, put something in there, put something on my site, call you up, call Rich Dolan up, or call Joe Murgia up and say, hey, I've got something going on, I just spoke to him. That's where I'm being, what we were just saying women in ufology need to do is get in there and jump into the conversation. That takes, do I put my neck out there and share it? And yes, because I believe that the information I'm given is significant. Now, he knows I'm going to share some of it, not that he's talking to me to have it shared. I don't want people to necessarily think that, but he knows a byproduct of our talking, and he's very clear on what parts, when we talk about something that he doesn't want me to share. I try to make sure I'm clear on that. Now, I'm always worried, could I screw up and say something I'm not supposed to? But he's reassured me I'd have to screw up really bad not to talk to me anymore. Now, you're right. He has an interest in me. There are long reasons. Grant knows some of those, but there's a long list of reasons why he's talking to me. You know, I joked with myself this morning getting ready saying, okay, you know, what if Grant says, well, why does he want to talk to you? And I'm going, well, there's a lot of reasons, and there's this list, and I don't want to take too much time on it. But I'm thinking, okay, you know, for the same reason he's you know, talking to Chris and a few other people, it's like, okay, you know, you go, okay, you know, either, you know, did he lose his mind, you know, or is there a method to his madness? Well, I think there's a method to his madness, that there are reasons. Some of those he's expressed to me. I don't mind saying he is very interested in my Millabs research, and there's a long list of reasons as to why he is. And so I think that's a big part of it. And a fellow abductee, someone he can talk to who understands. And, you know, I'm really grateful that a friend, someone who came on my tours, introduced us. And I'm really grateful that I have that connection. And I feel like now I have a responsibility to the rest of ufology, to which we're going to get right now, you know, share what he said. So there you go.
So yeah, and explain who he is, because people always ask, like, you know, why is this guy significant? Because
there was a delay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no,
okay.
To describe who this guy is, because he's not just any guy into the stars. He's not any guy in the government. He's like a main guy. And then the other question I want you to ask is, when you first met him, because there's always this thing about, remember you had the conversations with Danny Sheehan with me and stuff, and it's like, are you being set up? Is this, you know, they're gonna get you or whatever? And that's the first question I asked you after you had the interview was, so good guy or bad guy? And when you meet them, you have a different opinion of this idea that they're all these bad guys and they're in the background and they're out to get us and they're going to distort this story. They're all Richard Doty type characters.
Hey, I like Richard Doty. He's not a bad guy.
No, but I mean the reputation. That's the reputation a lot of people have.
I'm with you. I get along with Doty. Yeah. And but that doesn't mean I'm certainly at odds with him politically. You know, I'm at odds with him politically in some other ways, but
I just say that image.
You know, hey, in this day and age, you can't not listen to a researcher, someone's contributions, just because you may disagree with them politically. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if socially they're really, you know, messed up or something, and but I think he's got something to say. Oh yeah. And he has said some things to me kind of in semi-private that added to my research. So, you know, I'm
just saying the image.
And he was a player. Okay, so going back to, I'm sorry, Grant, what were you asking? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying the image, because there's this image that they're these bad guys, whoever you want to name, but people have this idea until you meet them. So you met them, and then I said, you good guy or bad guy, and then sort of explain who this guy is, because he's not just any guy. He's a main figure.
And Grant, also in response to what you just said, in both my Millabs research, I had to realize, like, often even those guys at that deep of a level are doing a job they were hired, trained to do, worked up through the ranks to do. They may be justifying it. Doesn't mean what they're doing is legal or moral, but, you know, I'm just saying so I had to come to terms with that and realize that, because I've also had guys involved as perpetrators in that come to me and be willing to talk to me. So it's like, I got to understand how they got there, why. Okay. And then with the working group, well, early on, why I started investigating them is because I became friends with these guys, and go, who are these guys? What are they doing? What's this thing? What was the aviary? What's NIDS? What's Bigelow? What's, what's Bass? Whatever, And so, and realizing that these were a bunch of high-level insiders, intelligence, aerospace, military, guys who had a real interest in the subject and wanted to know. Now, I've always had a problem with, were they digging? Were they looking into it since 1985 till right this minute? Yeah, but were they always sharing that? No. Okay, and sitting on it. But they had reasons, and you can get into, was that right or wrong, and et cetera. But I decided somewhere along the way I had to come to terms with that, and it's not all black and white. There's this gray area of, and you go, okay, do I trust an insider? Well, we wouldn't be getting information and stuff if we didn't. But does that also mean I believe everything they say, or I don't question their motives? Of course I do.
Right.
So going back to who's Jim. Okay. Jim Semivan is, I'd have to look up online, but I'm pretty sure it's Vice President of Operations, or Director of Operations, Director of Operations and Vice President of To the Stars Academy. So he founded this along with Tom DeLonge, and they kind of cooked it up together. So there we go. Tom had some ideas, Jim had some ideas. He actually has kind of explained that all to me. And so, that's it. He's operations director. So a lot of what To the Stars doing, he's overseeing and getting the different parts to play together.
Let me jump in real quick, Melinda.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to ask a juicy question from the perspective of nobody knows who he is. Was this guy a spook?
Oh yeah, going back to yeah.
The juicy part,
that was the other part. Thank you. I hadn't gotten to that part yet, but I got sidetracked. That happens, a lot. So, okay, so, and you guys, I didn't have much sleep last night, so
neither have we.
Yeah, okay, good. We're not alone. It's been a whirlwind 2 days, and it's not going to be over even with this, okay, so going back to your answer. Jim was very high level in the CIA. He headed up a bunch of different things and, up the chain of command. Now, I didn't hear the next part I'm about to say from him, but through another friend I know who had a low level position in the CIA and who asked around and had a supervisor call me and kind of inform me, and some connections that Danny Sheehan has, and etc. Okay, so what I understand is at one time he was like number 3. Okay, that you had like the director of the CIA, the assistant director, and then like him. Now I'm sure that there was a title at that time. If he told me, I'm just forgetting what it is, but I'm sure it was some long, director of operations and blah, 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 or something, okay. So, but what Jim has told me is part of his major job responsibility, and again, he was in different positions, and then he was a consultant, and now he's retired. Let's clarify, he is retired now, but he still occasionally consults.
Right.
He, and so I'm probably a believer in that phrase, once you're in the CIA, you never really leave, you certainly keep, and we're learning this through this whole process of disclosure and everything. That's, it came up in the panel yesterday, security oaths are forever, and so, and that's something to keep in mind with these guys. They're going to be really careful. When I say these guys, I mean, To the Stars, the working group, etc. They're going to be, real careful of not crossing that line against their security oaths, and they know where they can go and where they can't, and there's some wiggle room, which is why we're getting a few comments and stuff, but and I think when Jim talks to me, he catches himself. I mean, he's a pro, without a doubt. And Danny Sheehan always tells me, never forget this guy's background, never forget it, and so so yeah, he was very, very high level CIA, possibly at one time number 3. I believe that's probably the case. Oh, and what I started to say is Jim told me himself that he oversees or oversaw black budgets and the money allocation for the Black projects and Black programs, and therefore, you know, he's extremely versed in the whole secrecy stuff, spycraft, how it all works and everything, you know. And that was yesterday. I had a 2-hour conversation with him. About a half hour of it was personal stuff. You know, like the fact that he called me he texted me in the morning to say, sorry, it's taken me like a week to get back to you. I had family from out of town. I've been very busy. I'm sorry, you know, because I had tried to reach him before I did an interview on the SSCI report with Lorian Fenton, and I was so wanting to talk to him before that. And I have to say, sorry, Lorian, Grant's getting it, not you, but you know, I take these things as they come.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to, Grant, obviously.
Thank you.
So, but, you know, yeah. And Lorian loves you, so you know, you'll be forgiven.
Tell her she gets the next one.
Yeah, there we go. But and you know, and then I had conversations with Joe. So hi, Joe. Sorry that I'm talking to Grant now, but you know, but you can transcribe this and use it all you want. You know, so going back to yeah, Jim just you know, was, like I said, oversaw Black budgets and money allocation and everything, and other, you know, positions. I mean, I admit I maybe have not gone in depth with him since our original meeting, or original first couple of phone calls, and then meeting in public. Him and his wife were in the area and going to come through Sedona, so they made a point to come see me, and that was a long sit-down conversation that happened with them.
Okay, we've heard about that. So let's go to the one you had yesterday. You have
yes,
and you set it up. You basically contact him that you want to talk to him. So go through what you asked him, and what did he help you out with?
now I'm going to try to reduce my screen here and bring up some notes. Now, you guys, I need to give some disclaimers here, and I told Grant on the phone this morning I wanted to do this. Yesterday, see if I can bring that down so you can see you guys again. Come on. How do I do this? I know it's called split screen. Sorry. Okay, just get my act together.
You need
a
studio there, Melinda.
Yeah. Okay. Well, often I have things written out in front of me, so I'm not having to do the screen thing. But now, just so you guys know, yesterday I had the phone conversation with Grant about being on the panel, long story short there. And I told Grant, I said, well, Jim had called me already in the morning, or texted me, and then I called him back, long story short. So I called him, we had a phone conversation, and he said, look, I got to do, you know, I had these house guests, so I got to do laundry. In his retirement, apparently he has chores, you know, anyways, but he probably always did. And he said, you know, so Deb, his wife, said, you know, got to do the laundry and stuff. So he said, I have to do that. And he said, let me get a bunch of stuff done. So we agreed that I would call him. Now he's, you know, East Coast. And so I, you know, agreed that I would call him at a certain time. So there you go. And that we would talk. And actually he called me at that time. When that time came, my phone rang and I said, I'm supposed to call you. He said, well, I was just thinking about it, you know, so that was good that he, you know, he called me. And so there we go. And so I said to, you know, Grant, I was supposed to have this conversation with Jim. Then I did. Okay, 2-hour conversation with Jim. Rush from that to getting off and having to go from being at home on the phone and having to rush to my office where I'm seeing now, where I have much better internet connection for important interviews. So rushing from home to here, and then, you know, that traffic, whatever, and saying, you know, I'm going to be late. Grant knew that, to the panel. Then from the panel, I had 45 minutes afterwards to have dinner. And then I rushed to meet clients for my tour. I was with clients till 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, I see you laughing, Nicole. You know, yeah, exactly. You know, rushed home to get 6 hours of sleep, get ready for this morning, deal with a couple phone calls, try to get here early enough to review some notes, and that's it. So I apologize to everyone. I am not have as detailed notes about this as I'd want. I wrote notes, you
Yeah.
know, they're
You
scribbled.
haven't had time. You haven't had time to sit
I
down.
haven't had the
and read.
time. So here we go. So I apologize everyone in advance. It'll be a little disjointed. Grant and I talked this morning or an hour ago, you know, hour beforehand. And I said, look, I'm a little bit worried. And I said, look, I thought about postponing this to get my notes together. And I thought, you know what? No, better to do this while it's fresh in my head so I can answer your guys' questions and stuff. Okay. But going back to now, what I called him about was the SSCI report. And I think, Grant, before we get into it, I need to do a little background because I think we should not assume that everybody knows about it. Now, for those that do, I'm sorry, please give us some patience here, but I think we should talk about it just a little bit, don't you?
This is your first Kool-Aid session? When I asked you about did you drink the Kool-Aid, you're talking about, is that what you're going to talk about?
No. The SSCI report.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
you've got it, definitely, yeah.
I talked to Jim
majority
about.
people won't know what this is, so go
Okay.
through that, what it is. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. You're right. So we got to give him some background for the context of this whole conversation. But I called him because I had ended up putting a list of 22 questions together. Now, it turns out when we got into it, by the time we got through the first 10 questions, as I was looking at the other questions, I ended up skipping through them because he'd answered them, you know. So again, you guys, I apologize. My notes aren't together and I'm winging it here. So please have patience with that. Okay. Now let's go to the SSCI report first. Now I'm going to bring that up. Now, Grant, do we know how to do a share screen thing in Zoom?
Share screen is right in the middle of the little yellow folder in the bottom there. Share screen. Click on the bottom there. There should be a share screen right beside the chat.
Host disabled participant screen share.
Oh, shoot. Hang on.
Do you know how to turn it on?
I'm just looking here. Hang on. Let's see. They put all the security stuff on here.
Now I can read it. If we're not able to bring it up, I'll just read it. That's fine. But I thought it'd be good if people could follow. Now you guys, so everybody knows while you're doing that, I'll give this. When it broke, which I think was a week ago Wednesday or Tuesday. Do you remember, Grant, when the SSCI report came out, if it was a week ago Wednesday or Tuesday?
Yeah, it's about a week, yeah.
Yeah, it was a week ago Wednesday or Tuesday, so a week and a half ago. And what had happened is I got up, and often in the morning, if I wake up, can't get back to sleep, I'll get on the internet, and then I definitely can't get back to sleep. That happened. Being everybody else, right? So, and what I did is I realized that on Facebook, something was being talked about a little bit, and then I saw, because my social media is basically Facebook and a little bit of Twitter, but I follow Chris Mellon on Twitter, and Chris Mellon had put it out, and there's a To the Stars Twitter page, so both of those had put it out, and I go, what's this? And I kind of glanced, and then I saw people kind of commenting on it and whatnot. Well, all of a sudden, it wasn't until about noon I checked emails for the day, and at noon when I checked emails, I had an email from Jim Semivan. And that was very nice that he sent me a personal email to say, we got this accomplished. And you know, we did this, okay, with getting the Senate to do this. And as a result of our meetings with the senators, which many of us in the field knew had been going on for quite a while. I had talked about that many times, Grant, with you and others.
Yep.
And so the closed door meetings and stuff resulted in this, and they said the report has been made public, and Jim attached the report. So are we able to bring it up?
No, I haven't been able. It's in some sort of box. I can't find it. So you'll have to just wing it. Just give us the highlights.
Sorry, guys. Everybody, though, it is online. It can be found easily. I'm sure that Rankovic posted it, you know.
Yeah.
Giorgio Marinkovic, I'm sure he's got it. So if you're looking at his, feed where he keeps up on the entire story, he'll have it up there, as well as a few other places. I think I linked to it on my Facebook page, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, so let me reduce this again and go to it so I can go right to, oh gosh, of course, I'm bringing up everything I don't want to bring up. Shoot. Come on. Okay, here we go. And let me make you guys smaller so I can see you. Okay, there we go. Okay. So, oh shoot, that's not the report. That's my Jim Semivan notes. Okay, here it is. Okay, so everybody, it is called, so what this is that we're going to be talking about, God, it doesn't want to do that. Okay, come on. I'm about to get frustrated. And I'm good with electronics and I don't want to waste time, but it is, I had it up, but this just gets, okay. So it's called the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021. It's an official, U.S. Senate document. It says all that at the top. It's got all the official stuff. Put out June 17th. Was the order to be printed, and it says Mr. Rubio from the Select Committee on Intelligence submitted the following. So it's called the SSCI, which is the Select, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That's where the SSCI comes from. Okay, and so and then it goes on, and even in the email that Jim sent me, he said go to page 11. So I'm scrolling to page 11. And there it gets into, okay, now let me give a little bit of background for people to understand. Bob covered this beautifully in the panel last night, but in case people hadn't heard that, that after the To the Stars guys, mostly Chris and Lou, and taking other people occasionally with them, but kind of they're doing, had all these closed door sessions over 2 years with senators. It resulted in this new report, which is a document being put forth by the Senate to go to Congress to be with items to be included in next year's intelligence budget. Okay, so this is them saying this is what we're going to update the intelligence budget with these things. Now, Jim told me that that's in August that Congress goes through this, so we won't know how much they included or not. But it's a proposal, so the report is a proposal. Now, I am hearing from others and from Jim that Congress usually puts these things through. I asked him specifically about it. I'll get into that in just a minute. But I had already seen online people completely unrelated to the UFO field, people who talk about Senate budgets and the intelligence community and blah, 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 were already saying that they expected these items to go through. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be changes to it. It is a proposal, but Congress tends to trust that, from everything I've been reading and everything, that they kind of trust the Senate's done their homework. They don't want to have to go do the homework on this. So they're like, okay, if you guys say this is needed, if you're telling us this is needed, we kind of have to trust you. This is needed. You've done the work on it, the background. Now they can ask about certain things. And, but this is as it's put through. So in a while, I'll get into the changes that can happen to it. But okay, so this is how it's put through. And I'm going to kind of just, paraphrase from stuff here. So it says equitable treatment of relocation costs for intelligence community civilians. That's different. Okay, and then it says here's the next section. Advanced aerial threats. Okay. And you guys don't get hung up on it being a threat. This is how they get it approved. This is how they get it through Congress. This is how they get budget. And I'll get into that in a minute. I talked to Jim all about that, but don't get hung up on that. Okay. It's what's required to get it approved.
That's just part of the bad lingo that they have to use.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's this great piece that's worth mentioning. To the Stars Academy is now doing a podcast, okay? And podcast episode 4 was Tom. Did you hear that, Nicole or Grant? Did you guys hear that?
No, I haven't heard it.
I did. I sent it to you, Grant.
Or
It just
Nikki?
got
Is it
buried
Nicole?
and everything
I
else.
keep wanting to say Nicole. Is it Nicole? Yeah, it's Nicole. Okay.
That's
Nikki
why
and
I
should call you
Nicole.
Nicole.
That's why I hire Nikki, because she finds all the stuff for me. I may not read it, but she finds it.
Grant, the research community expects you to actually read these things. As women, right? Nicole, as women, we read them.
Eventually we do. That's what I'm reading at 3:30 in the morning going, what was
I
I
can just see
supposed to
Dolan
read?
watching this going, I can see Richard going, I read it. Along with everybody else. Shame
No,
on you, Grant.
Tracy
Shame.
reads it first.
Oh! There may be
Hey,
truth.
she got the
Okay, sorry,
15
everybody.
pages first. That's what I'm basing that off of.
I can see her listening to this and nodding, going, Okay, going back to, sorry, you guys, we're wasting time. So here, the advanced aerial threats, well, I might as well, will take too long to read it. I should paraphrase, because everybody can go online and read it. I'm just thinking, maybe it's quicker just to read it. I think it is. Okay. The committee supports the efforts of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force at the Office of Naval Intelligence to standardize collection and reporting. So you guys, that's a really important right there. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, UAP task force. Okay, so a task force group put together at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Okay, you know, and they said they're supporting them to standardize collection and reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon. And any links that they have to, so again, to standardize the collection amongst all the different intelligence branches, okay? I started to say, I'm sorry, before I get into this, I lost my track there. To the Stars in that podcast. Chris and Lou were answering questions of Tom. I recommend everybody hear this. It's called episode 4. I do have a direct link to it on my, and it's on Spotify, but if you have to download Spotify to listen to it, it's free, whatever. But okay, but I have a link on my Facebook page. So if you go to Melinda Leslie on Facebook, scroll down, you'll see it right there. But you guys, you need to watch this, because a lot of their comments and what they said matched, and Jim hadn't seen it. It was really funny when I talked to him. He had not seen it, and he kept saying stuff, and I said, oh my God, that's exactly what Chris and Lou said. And he goes, did they? I mean, no, truly, he hadn't seen it. He really hadn't. He'd been family for 5 days, so he hadn't had a chance to see it. But and it was pretty funny. So I can tell you, watch that. That they answered a lot, but they go into this too. So okay. So unidentified phenomena, any links they have to adversarial foreign governments and the threat they pose to U.S. military assets and installations. However, the committee remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, despite the potential threat. The committee understands that the relevant intelligence may be sensitive. Nevertheless, the committee finds that the information sharing and coordination across the intelligence community has been inconsistent, and that this issue has lacked attention from the senior leaders. Therefore, the committee directs the DNI, the DNI to, in consultation with the director and secretary, jointly consider relevant to submit a report within 180 days of the date of enactment of the act to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as anomalous aerial vehicles. So they actually clarified that there, you guys, for anyone who goes, well, are you sure that's what they meant? Anomalous aerial vehicles, there you go. Including observed airborne objects that have not been identified. Okay, and that was page 11, and then you go to page 12. So there's other things in here, obviously have nothing to do with UAP. I haven't even looked at the rest of the report to see what some of the other items are. There's one other item in this report that's been making the major news, that Congress is already saying we don't think we're going to put that through. And it was another item. So it's just interesting, completely unrelated. And I thought, well, that's interesting. They're talking about problems with that, but no one's bringing up problems with this. So, okay, so going on. The committee further directs the report to include, number one, a detailed analysis of unidentified, so I'll just say UAP data and intelligence reporting collected or held by the Office of Naval Intelligence, including data and intelligence reporting held by the UAP task force. Number two, a detailed analysis of unidentified phenomena data collection, including A, geospatial intelligence, B, signals intelligence, C, human intelligence, and D, measurement and signals intelligence. I think we all understand what that means if you guys want to ask me about it, but I know everyone wants me to get to what Jim was saying, so hopefully everyone understands. Okay, number three, a detailed analysis of data of the FBI. Now this is very interesting. We all know in the UFO field, we know quite well, and Grant, you know really well from going through all of Stanton Friedman stuff, right? The FBI had a big interest in this and has many files. That data collection alone, from what the FBI knows about this, is going to be massive. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, just alone, and that's just one branch of intelligence, let alone the other 30, right? You know. So okay.
The FBI branch had me excited also when I read that, because when you know kind of the background of the FBI and what they actually do research, that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and all that stuff they had on Stanton Friedman, you know, I just, you know, I gave that as an example in my conversation with Jim. I said, well, I know they have stuff on researchers like Stanton, you know, but others, you know, and et cetera, and letters going back and forth and, you know, et cetera. So, I mean, like I said, Grant, you're the expert on that, without a doubt. Okay.
Melinda, they have a file on you too. They do, you know it. And me and everybody else.
Someone in there is bored to tears, that's for sure. Okay, detailed analysis of yeah. Okay. Detailed data of FBI. Okay, derived from investigations of intrusions. So they emphasize here, derived from investigations of intrusions of unidentified aerial phenomena, data over restricted United States airspace. So they're kind of, you know, limiting the scope there. Okay. So maybe they won't get in the personal stuff. Actually, that's kind of what Jim said. Now they think about it, Jim did say that, you know, it'll be the scope of what it says here. He kept emphasizing that. Okay. 4, a detailed description of an interagency process for ensuring timely data collection and centralized analysis of all unidentified aerial phenomena, including the federal government, regardless of which service or agency acquired the information. So in other words, from all the agencies, okay? Identification of an official accountable for the process described in paragraph 4. Number 7, identification. Let me make sure I didn't skip something. Potential. Okay, so number 6, identification of potential aerospace or other threats posed by the UAP phenomena to national security and an assessment of whether this UAP activity may be attributed to one or more foreign adversaries. So they're also including foreign adversaries, but they've said unusual aerial phenomena. You know, that's all been clarified in it already. So everyone goes, anyone who's looking at this, oh, and, you know, debunkers say, oh, they just mean foreign. No, you guys, they've made it very clear that it's not just foreign. And again, see, Nicole, you just said it. We know they're playing the word game. They're playing the word game to include this, put it through. It's just the word game. The senators writing this, I'm going to get into that from Jim. They know what they're saying. Okay. So that was number 7. Okay. number 7, identification of any incidents. So that was number 7. Identification of any incidents or patterns that indicate a potential adversary may have achieved breakthrough aerospace capabilities that could put the U.S. strategic or conventional forces at risk. And number 8, recommendations regarding increased collection of data, enhanced research and development, and additional funding for other resources. The report shall be submitted in unclassified form, unclassified, but may include a classified annex. These are things I asked Jim about, so we'll get into that. Okay. And so that's it, you guys. That's the wording. Very meaty. And we have to the stars today. Not, you guys, I don't want anyone to think I'm just singing their praises all the time. Not even. I have questions all the time. But that they had meetings with the senators and briefed them for 2 years on and off. And it resulted in this. Okay. And other things. So, okay, now that gives everyone the background so we can get right into it. Like I said, I had questions for Jim. I wanted to group my questions because as I wrote them, all 22, they were as I thought about them over like a week, right? I kept adding, knowing that, I had called him right away and, it took a week to hear back from him, but that's just as well. I kept adding. Now, so I wanted to group these, and unfortunately I did not have time to do that. So the first thing I really got into, and it's funny, again, I did the little radio show with Lorianne Fenton, and we joked about, Lorianne said, ask him what's in it for Melinda and Lorianne. But what we meant, we're just kidding. But what we meant was what's in it for we the people, what's in it for the people. So I said, how will the Senate committee findings, the SSCI report, bring about disclosure? So I actually asked him that. And I said, how do we the people get to hear the data? And now I'm gonna probably go ahead and give you like 3 or 4 questions I had in a row because his answers kind of rambled with all of them. So question number 2 was, will the findings report be made public, at least in part? And then number 3, what assurances are in place that, other than just the goodness of the senator's heart, because between you and me, guys, I wouldn't trust these senators farther than I could pick them up and throw them across the room. I'm not a fan.
Okay.
Let's just say. Okay. Politics aside, right? Okay. So, what, and I told Jim that. I said, look, I'm not a fan. What were the goodness of their heart? They're going to share this with us. So I said, what are the assurances? And how is it guaranteed? Will the results ever see the light of day? So that's what I asked him. Okay, so now I'm going to go into his answers on everything thus far. Now, you guys, again, I apologize for the disjointed quality here. So under number 1, I wrote a bunch of just quick, notes as he was talking. I wasn't asking him to repeat stuff, and it was cryptic. So, okay. Now, first off, somewhere in there, and it's the first thing I wrote down, he got into to the stars deeper knowledge and what they believe on all this, okay? And there was a lot of interesting discussion. They said they've seen the longer film pieces. So when we talk about the film pieces, of course, we're talking about FLIR 1, also called the Tic Tac, the Go Fast video, and the gimbal video. Okay, everybody out there knows. They've seen the longer pieces, okay, directly. So I can quote Semivan on that. They have seen the longer pieces. Now,
and other videos? What about the other videos? There's rumors there was up to 200. Just to 3 did he admitted?
No, we didn't go into it, and I didn't ask because we were focusing on his answers to those questions. Yes, there are other videos. He said, and others. Okay, he said something just for me to hear at that point regarding the nature of the videos. Without quoting him, I'll change up the context kind of just to say, it's incredible what's in them, okay? So I can say that. I'm not quoting him. Sorry, Jim, but okay, I'm not quoting him. But he said incredible stuff, and the pieces are much longer. Now we know that from Kevin Day and others, right? You know, we know full well that there are longer pieces, and Gary Voorhees and his going into the control room and seeing the longer ones, etc. So we know that. But I thought it was interesting that Jim told me that flat out. They have seen the longer pieces, and there and others, yes, Grant, and others, okay, and that what's in them is incredible. So I can say that, okay. Okay, so he said in relationship specifically to question number 1, you know, how will this bring about disclosure? He's like something kind of funny. He says, we don't know. The report is to Congress to include it in the bill. Now he went on later, and I'm jumping ahead to include this now, but later in asking questions, he went into that they're going to keep on this, that this is just phase 1 of a very, very long process, okay? This is to get Congress to allocate that, yes, there's a task force, that this task force is Office of Naval Intelligence and overseen by the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, okay? And the Director of National Intelligence, that office overseeing this, and that, and he said the Navy, oh, by the way, in his email to me that he originally sent me, he said not only is the Senate fully on board, but he said the Navy is not backing down. That's a direct quote. And he said the Navy not backing down is because he said, he explained it more yesterday. The Navy has a big interest in wanting this to go through. They really care. So many sightings and incidents have involved the Navy that they're a huge helping, you know, push this through and convince the senators. Was in great part the Navy joining up with To the Stars to convince them that this all.
Can I jump in on that real quick, Leslie?
Sure.
Or Melinda?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm reading both your names at once.
Yeah, people do that all the time. Don't worry, I'm used to it.
I always kind of look at the Navy involvement as such a bonus. If they want their hands in this and they want this information, I mean, not a lot of people realize the R&D factor of our United States Navy. They research and develop and put out so much tech that obviously they want this information from across the board, from everybody.
Yeah.
And they do have a lot of witnesses in their ranks, I guess you could say. So
yes,
I like that the Navy's on board, not just the
so do I.
factory with the TTSA. And, you know, we've all over the years kind of thumbed ourselves with the Air Force and, you know, maybe their involvement in things in the past. So I'm kind of a cheerleader for the Navy being in on
He and I got into that. I'm not sure if I have notes on it later, but since you brought that up, he kind of lamented a little bit that the Air Force has not chimed in on this, and we, I guess I asked him to speculate as to why, but I think it's for the reasons you just said. And you know, the Air Force has a history with this Project Blue Book. Okay. Now I did ask him later. I will talk about if they're going to be looking into the historical data very much. So, yeah. But he said, you know. He said, I suspect they'll look into that, and the Air Force is going to have to answer as part of this group and, you know, in their information. But I think the Air Force has a little bit of maybe, and I think he was speculating this embarrassment, you know, over the fact that they had Project Blue Book and they made an official statement, and now they kind of got to eat crow, you know. He didn't say that, I'm saying that. But, you know, they have to kind of correct themselves. So that could be a reason that they're not that there's been no pushback there at all, but there's just been literally like not a lot of comment from them. Is
what
my
I would,
understanding.
One more thing I would say is that if anybody wants to research into what the Navy research labs do, you can find all that information online, and it is so mind blowing and cool. Like, it's so obvious why they would want to be involved.
They want this, they want this. Both from a witness, and intelligence level down to, like you said, they have an interest specifically in the technology and the technology to become from this, that they know exists because of the sightings and the reports and everything, but isn't in their hands. And we discussed this in the panel last night. It got out of the military and the Department of Defense and the Pentagon's hands into corporate hands. And that's a problem. And that may be a problem in what they're going to find in all this, but we hope that they go there. And actually, Jim hopes that they go there. And he says, oh my God, Chris Mellon is like hell bent on this. Chris Mellon wants it to go there, has a problem with that. That's an issue, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, moving right along. Okay. So he said, the report is to Congress, it'll be included in the bill, that DNI, Director of National Intelligence, is the authority and that they have tremendous authority. Part of putting this in their hands is they really have the authority to say, you must provide this. There's like Jim Kemp emphasizing, there's no real wiggle room about it, except for with the stuff at the point that it goes private. But everything that's at the government level, they can demand be given to them, Okay. And then there's legal repercussions and stuff if it's not. Okay. So he said Chris wrote it. The language and everything was written by Chris for the Senate. He said Chris basically wrote it. They had input and a little, some tweaking, Rubio's group, right? But he said basically Chris wrote it, and that Chris being, of course, Chris Mellon, and that Chris Mellon really wants it out. Okay, he's very driven on this. He says, we want it unclassified, meaning to the stars. And he says, but the Senate says they do too. They really want it unclassified, except for that classified annex part, which I'll get into in just a little bit. Okay, so now that was kind of all in response to question number one. Question number two, he said, this is an interesting side thing. I don't remember him saying, don't share this. I hope I'm good. Okay, he said, out of all of them, Hal is read in at the deepest level. He says he doesn't know how much, but he believes it to be significantly. Hal's kind of a little tight lip on how much, but it's very clear. He says, when it comes to what is known on the UFO subject in any official capacity, out of all of them, Hal is read in, and much more than him. He said, look, that wasn't a part of what I did for my work for the government and the CIA. But he said, Hal and the projects he's been in on, and that we all know that. Come on, you guys, this is confirmation. Hal is read in on the deepest level. He says, Hal says he's sitting on it for a reason, and his tight-lippedness is, has some specific reasons. Probably a lot of them are his NDAs and, et cetera, his clearances. Okay. I assume that, but not a far reach. Okay. Now he says this, he said, they know, meaning to the stars know that disclosure has already happened. The Pentagon releasing, there's been a disclosure already, which gets back to Grant, you're often commenting on this, that he didn't say this, but it's obvious that he's referring to something that they've said repeatedly in the past, which is the idea of confirmation. Yeah. They're going for confirmation.
One step at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going for confirmation. But he says, to the stars knows that disclosure has already happened, okay? And the thing is, the Senate knows this, okay? And he's saying, now from their briefings, and he said that's why the Senate is wanting to bring this information up and say who knows how much and for how long. He said, Jim went on to say, that, but also the senators, you can't sit on it. It's beyond stupid to do so at this point. The data is needed, like you just said, Nicole, needed by the Navy, needed by the different branches, needed by the Pentagon. I mean, I think they're coming to the realization this got out of their hands. That's my take, but that makes sense here, okay? So he said it's beyond stupid to sit on. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you his quote. So question number 3 was kind of a whole bunch of things here. He goes, I don't know that there's any assurances that they you know, that was a little disconcerting to me when he right off the bat goes, when I said, are there assurances to, you know, this remaining, you know, Republic report? He says, I don't think there's any assurances built in. That's a quote there. So he said he said there'll be yearly and monthly reports. This first 180-day report is just like, give us like an overview of what you've been looking at. So this isn't the detailed stuff, because he and I were talking about, my God, it's going to take years to get into the detail. Like we were saying, just with what the FBI knows alone, let alone what the CIA knows, or what the Office of Naval Intelligence knows, or what, you know, NSA knows. I mean, God, you know, it just makes your head swim. I mean, him and I were discussing all that. It's so much. And so he's saying, this is just, you know, an overview from each for the 180-day report. And then he says, those findings will then make them go, we need to know more or not. And he says, we're going to keep on it. At no point, he says, are we going to let the senators that we have our foot in the door on, you know, are we going to let them back down from, you know, pushing this? Like, it's not like, oh, we got our answer, we're done, and walk away. You know, he said, no. He said, we're going to keep on them about this. So, okay. So, but he says there are no assurances to the degree that'll be shared publicly. But he says, the senators, well, it gets into my next thing. He says Rubio, Warner, and the other senators, he says, they want to know. They said, he says, though I'm quoting him, he says, they really want to know. They were never briefed on any of this. Now, if they were, would they be able to tell these guys, even in the closed door sessions, whether they were briefed or not? Maybe not. So I question. But again, you know, this is again quoting Jim, whether it's true or not, you know, but he says Rubio, Warner, and the others have very much spelled out, we were never briefed. And he says they're not happy about it. He said they are like, we should have been briefed on this all along. And why not? Well, now we get into the whole process of how intelligence information gets stovepiped, going like up the chimney, you know, in each organization, is not shared laterally, you know, and it goes up the command, and that's it. So the stovepiping of this information, the gathering and keeping it within, has excluded it from getting out and going to the committees that would be briefing the senators, you know. So that might be a very true statement, that they've never been briefed, or at least the current guys said we've not been briefed, or maybe they have. We all think, oh, they know everything. You know, Tom, in that TTSA podcast, explained how he always thought, you know, that these guys knew all this stuff. They'd be briefed on all the intelligence stuff. And I asked Jim about that, because I had a sense, and I'd already listened to that podcast. And so Tom DeLong is saying, no, look, you know, we always thought they'd be briefed. And then, you know, Lou and Chris go on to describe the process. But you know, I said the same thing to Jim. I said, look, I know, yeah, Tom said it on there. I know that they're not briefed on everything. And Jim said, yeah, they're only briefed on the parts that they needed, the parts that they asked for with information. You know, they're giving, yes, there's these intelligence briefings, but it's not all the details. So much as little details, it'd take all day, weeks, and years to tell them everything, you know. And so, you know, how convenient that stuff doesn't have to be shared with them. But for them to get briefed on to the degree that there's data on this, and I can just imagine if the Navy's fully on board, like, you know, like he said, and Nicole, you were just saying, and it's like, you go, well, wait a second, if the Navy, you know, was in on the briefings of these guys, I'm sure these senators' hair was standing on end, you know, like what they were learning and being told was really known. So they're like, so for them to say, we've not been briefed on that, you know, and they're not happy about it. Well, maybe it's because they never asked for it. I mean, that sounds so stupid, but they've never asked for it. And so now this is what this report is about. And if all of it gets approved, now they've asked for it, you know. Okay, so going on, how are we on time? I got to be real careful here. So they want to make this public knowledge. Jim says, not just, of course, to the Stars Desk, but he says Rubio, Warner, and the other senators want to make this whole area public knowledge. And I just said about the info in stovepipes, it needs to get out of the stovepipes. It needs to come out of the stovepipes and be shared laterally, or at least with this task force, so the senators can get briefed on it. Okay. The senators will then decide, and so is the task force, what parts can be put public, and then you have the classified annex. Certainly, and Jim and I discussed this, and come on, guys, we're not kindergartners here. We all know there are certain things that are probably, because he said, Jim went on, and of course, that there are things that should be classified. There's things you don't want to get in any enemy hands, because anything that's made public is made public for the rest of the world, and so of course there's parts, and I said, well, how much can get buried in the classified annexes, and that's where the real good data goes, other than the stuff you don't want to go to the adversaries. And he said, that's their decision, but he said the senators seem like they want to be able to share a bunch of this. They, that's a seed change to me. If that's more than, I believe he's saying that to me, if they're just giving him lip service, or to the stars lip service. But I'm like, if that's true, then they're wanting to make a certain amount of this public, or what they can, aside from what do you not let into, adversaries' possible hands. Well, I could get like certain ways and means stuff, of course, and certain technology stuff, but saying that it's there, like, and he said this initial thing won't get into the in-depth stuff, like, or at least he said, I doubt that they'll go into submitting the information like crash retrievals, and
Well, here, let me ask both of your thoughts on this real quick here, just because I would like to know your opinion on this. I mean, we're talking about the Navy and R&D and development here, and this is kind of par for the course, not just with anything in ufology, but this is kind of how our black tech, or whatever it is, gets to the public. And not just to the public, but it kind of has to go through these filters. So if there's anything good, other companies can start working with this product to produce it for civilian use. It's things like that that take this whole long process as well.
That's
so
what Jim,
if there's, yeah, continue, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I cut you off. I apologize.
Oh, I was just going to say, found UFOs or pieces or all this technology that we think they might have information on, which this kind of goes hand in hand with what we know about Mr. Putoff's work and things like that. We know over the decades they have worked on things. What they have
there's
been
the
able
metamaterials
to
analysis stuff. So they have crashed debris amongst these guys.
Even without being able to figure out what they had, I naturally assume they are able to apply some aspects to what they've seen to our current technology, or how we can improve things that we already have. So this sort of process needs to happen in order for it to become consumer based, I guess is what you could say, which is another reason. And I didn't know if you could kind of follow suit with that.
Jim says that's why, he kind of said that's why Chris, he didn't say the word hellbent, you guys, just so you know, that's my, that Chris is hellbent, that's me, not him. But he said that Chris cares so much. He said, because of what you were just saying, he realizes that this needs to be out there where it can benefit, mankind, et cetera.
Well,
and that it's being held back. Now, we all know that, but what drove Chris to write this, talk to the senators, and the Navy's involvement, like you were saying, so you put all these pieces together, and it's pushed what we're now getting, which is a much bigger step towards disclosure. Now, this is the first step. Granted, this is a proposal. It has to go through. I'll get into a little bit more in that in just a minute. But okay, so moving on. And he said, well, the 180-day report, this is quoting him, the 180-day report is supposed to be unclassified, with the exception of things that really need to be. but you know, they want to have it be unclassified. Again, this, you guys, I'm not saying it's going to happen just this way. And he's even saying this is what the senators are telling him, you know, but it's like, you know, even they admit they're, you know, fingers are crossed on this, like, you know, and that they're going to keep on it. I said, are you guys done? You briefed the senators, you're done, no more briefings? He said, no. He said, we're going to push after they get this first report and the findings, we're going to push. And if we have to rebrief them to say, nope, not all in. And even the Navy goes in with them. No, this ain't it. This, nope, there's more, you know. And so he says, we're going to push it. Okay. I asked him, I probably have more notes on this, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going from my type notes, and at some point I ran out of time today and the rest of the scribbles. So I have to go from the type to the scribbles. But okay. I asked, you know, will the stars know much about this? Will you be told anything? And he said, officially, no, there's no requirement to share anything with them. But he said, you know, the senators that we briefed and our connections, he said, will hear, you know, they'll hear. And they may be given the, if there's an addendum or a new report or whatever Congress comes out with, he says, I suspect we will get that. There's no requirement, but he said, you know, yeah, they probably get it. Okay. And he says, so he actually, the quote was, friends may leak it to them. Okay. Friends they have and their connections will leak it to them. It's not leaked. It'll be public, you know, it'll be public, but they may get it first, kind of thing. Okay. Let's put it that way. Okay. You know, before it goes out to the public. So, and he that's an assumption, but that's, you know, sounded like a safe assumption. Okay. Now, this is a big thing. This is a really big thing, because we got into the whole thing about the threat language, and we've already discussed that today, but this is a quote from Jim. To the stars does not believe that any of this is a threat. So anyone who says, oh, they're threat mongering, he said that they hate that to hear that, because of course that's how you get things moved forward. Like we just said, that's how you get it put through.
Yeah, that's significant. That's significant.
Yeah.
You would say that.
Yeah. So that's a takeaway from this for sure. I mean, all these things are, but that is, they do not believe that it's a threat. He went on and on kind of about that. He said, you know, yeah, anything in your aerospace, you know, like he gave the reasoning and the basic, you know, concerns that are threatened. You know, Elizondo always does this muddy boot prints thing, right? It's muddy footprints, you know, and so that's a threat to your environment if you see that. Well, yes, okay. And this going on during military operations, sharing the same airspace, access to classified airspace, sure, because you can never assume it's the guys from out there. You know, it's not the space foreign intelligence. It might be Earth foreign intelligence, you know. So, and so that can never, you know, so that always has to be considered. But as far as whether he went into, you know, we know that they have not demonstrated aggression towards us, meaning the others, you know, the space-based UAP phenomena, and you know, and he knows that, you know, it's down the road, you know, way down the road, you know, a bridge too far, as I'm always saying, to get into the extraterrestrial part, you know, who's flying these and everything. He said, we want to know, the senators want to know, it gets discussed, okay, but to get to those levels of data, you got to start off with, get stuff out of the stovepipes, you know, what's known by the agencies, how much do they know? So they want to know, like, do you have reports on this? Have you done studies? And he said that gets into things like, you know, the Blue Book and the Condon Report and those things, that those things exist, and others, you know. And he said, you know, those are the ones we know about. How many others are unknown, you know? And so,
has he ever given you any indication of what he actually thinks is going on? Because there's stories that he's sort of a religious guy. Does he see it as a religious phenomena, or ETs? Or
we didn't get into that. We didn't get into that in this conversation, but I think he's had a huge learning curve. And now, you know, does he probably know where I'm coming from on it? Yeah. And, You know, sometimes I think, okay, is he telling me what I want to hear? You know,
And
that's always a concern.
so why do they use the
Always.
word the others? They're always using the word the others.
Yeah. Well, again, he went on and on, you guys, about them not thinking it's a threat. No, they basically said, we know it's not a threat. You know, there's no evidence of that kind of aggression. Very little, and it was usually in response to us. And you know, he went on and on. And again, you know, is he telling me what I want to hear? I hope not. You know, he knows I'm going to share that. This was not something where he said, don't share this, you know, and I've always been clear to him, if there's any part of this conversation you don't want shared, you need to make that very clear to me, you know. Okay. So moving right along. So I have here questions 5 and 6, and then none of the responses. So I got to go to my other notes. Okay. Now, I asked about, maybe this was a dumb question retrospectively, but I asked at the time, you know, is there anything in it for you guys with To the Stars or any of its members? Because remember, I always say, Jim has said, it's more than the public face of the group. They're a much bigger group of 40 or 50, you know, like over 40 people. And so I go, you know, is the immediate group or the extended group possibly any part of this committee? And he said, not that I know of, was kind of his response. He says, we're not government employees. And now I should have clarified anybody in the bigger group part of, you know, but I didn't clarify. So it was easy for him to say, you know, To the Stars on its surface level. He says, none of us are currently government employees. Not that they know of, but he got into this whole thing that was very interesting. So with a caveat. So what's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? He went into their vault program, and you can look at this, the To the Stars website. He's told me to check it out more, and I admit it, between us here, I haven't. But this vault program is this data collection that they brought this guy on to their board. I want to say his name begins with an S. Grant, do you know who it is on their board, or can either of you bring it up on the computer with, okay. But that guy is this guy. He's got amazing connections, but he's also a computer guy, you know, programming, whatever. And so they've come up with this whole vault program, which was a file data collection and sharing thing. And he says, we are offering that free of charge to be used by the government, you know. And he said, we've offered it to the senators. They've shown great interest. And he said, it could be down the road that use of that database is by them, but he said, we're not going to charge them for it, you know. And he said, it'll be a public database. It'll be made public. But he said, we're going to encourage, it'll be a public file system database, everything. Again, I would need to look it up, but if anyone knows more about it, my apologies. And that, you know, they've showed interest. So he said, that may be the part that's in it for them later, is the use of the vault. And he said, you know, it's great PR to say it's being used by the intelligence community and everything. So anyways, but he kind of got into that, and that was kind of a surprise to me. I said, there's a lot of effort on To the Stars to do all this. You know, again, that was the what's in it for you guys, other than your desires towards disclosure. I realized too, you guys, you know, I'm saying what he said to me about this. Of course, if there was more, he probably wouldn't say that to me. You know, I mean, he's not saying everything. You know, he's saying what he can. I've never doubted that. He said they would be required, like everyone else, to submit a request for proposal, RFP. He said, we want to do technology development, but if we want to be involved in any of those projects, we would be required just like everyone else. He said, he went in, I was surprised at this, he did went into the history of Bass and ATIP and Bass and Bigelow submitting. The reason a lot of that was farmed out to them is they submitted a proposal RFP, but he said, because of our knowledge and our background and those involved, so, you know, the folks from NIDS and Bass, right? Okay, because of their knowledge and their involvement and their connections, that their proposal made more sense. So they got farmed out a lot of the ATIP stuff. So that's how that happened. Now again, I think everybody listening, or the majority of people, know that, but I didn't ask that. He just brought all that up, and he was describing, he said, just how, a proposal was put forth. He said, could we submit a proposal? He said, probably down the road, but we're not at that level in technology development. He said, would we like to get there? Yes. But he said, just like Bigelow and Bass had to submit an RFP, he said, we would also have to submit an RFP and start from scratch. Just because of our past connections to that does not make us automatically receivers.
So he's confirming that the Bigelow deal wasn't a sweetheart deal with Reed, right?
I didn't ask him in those words. He just said, he brought it all up to give that as an example of they had to submit. But he said, but they had the connections. And yes, he did bring up, and the connections to Reed. Okay. Yeah. So I think, take it however you want. I think it was an admittance that all that process took place, that they had to submit. And he said there wasn't an absolute guarantee, but he said because of the knowledge and the connections, and the knowledge and the connections, meaning the technology and how, and all the et cetera, et cetera.
Now, that would make sense if you got two companies with the same bid price or whatever, and one knows nothing about UFOs. Well, you're obviously going to go with the one.
Between you and me, I think we know in this community that Reed had a lot to do with that. He mentioned Reed, and he said, and the other senators involved, he threw out names in context to our talk of Glenn and Inouye and, et cetera, et cetera. So, so he said, now it's funny you should bring that up, Grant. In my talk, in a long talk, and I do have a full presentation that I did late in the fall. It's still my last complete presentation on the history of the working group and my involvement. But I go back to those same senators. Thank you, Nicole, for smiling. I appreciate that. I take it you saw it. I hope. But anyway, so going back to that, I realized that when the remote viewing program was going to get tossed out, it got like on hold and then got more funding and continued for a couple more years, that according to Jim Schnabel's book on the history of the remote viewing, that he specifically mentions how those same senators, Reed, Inouye, Glenn, and there's one other, and I'm forgetting the name right now, but anyways, I don't have my fingertips, but that they had gotten the approval for the money, so the money for the remote viewing. So this group, so you guys remember, that's still the working group behind all that, okay? That these same guys had those connections. I say that in that talk, they went back to those connections again, Now I didn't bring that up with Jim. He'd probably, I think he must know that. I think he probably, if I did ask him, I suspect that he would go, yes, they've known him all along,
Melinda, I have to go, so you keep going. You're hot on the stuff here, and Nicole will continue and she'll finish it off, but I want you to continue because I've got the scoop here and I don't want to lose.
Nicole, are you able to shut this down at the end and everything on your end? I can't hear you. Mic is off. Nicole, your mic.
There you go.
Nicole is.
Yeah, you can.
We can't hear her. Oh, now, okay. Yeah, now we can.
I'm here now.
Okay, sorry, we couldn't hear you. Your mic was muted. So you're good with that? You can shut it all down on your end?
I think so. I'll just push buttons till it hangs up, I think.
How about with the recording of this and everything, Grant?
It'll just keep recording. As soon as you shut it off, it'll stop recording. And because I'm
sorry you have to go. I wanted more of your input, but that's all right. Hey, you know what you can do? You watch it later before. Can we talk about your thing tonight?
What do you mean talk? Oh, if you, I'm back in half an hour, so you can call me. Yep. So if you're still talking,
you have another show tonight. Do you want to?
In 2 hours, we go back on again.
Okay.
So if you phone me, say an hour and a half from now.
I'll say this for everyone. I don't want to step on your toes, but you have another show tonight.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But if you phone me, say in an hour and a half from now.
Okay. On this other show tonight, you can address. You could have the guests you're having on address some of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we'll just mention it's Bob.
Okay, it's Bob McGuire. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to step on your toes.
No,
I want to come from you.
Yeah,
Okay.
And so we will. You give me a call just before we go on for that show, and we'll put the questions to him, and hopefully I can have both you on at some time and to exchange back and
Well,
forth. Because
just so everybody knows, an hour before this happened, I know you got to go, Grant, but an hour before this happened, I called Grant and I said, I want Bob McGuire on with us because he knows more about all these processes and the intelligence processes, and all his responses last night on the panel matched things Jim and I talked about, like verbatim, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, and I said, look, I don't know these things. I wasn't in the intelligence community. I'm just going with it. Jim told me, and now I know Bob has such a good understanding of it. So I said, please, and he said, well, and Grant admitted then, I have Bob on later, and I didn't want to bring it up last night, but, you know, and he said, so, but please, you know, the rest of this, so go back and watch this end, that part I'm about to do with Nicole, and add it to things you asked Bob about. Thank you.
Will do. Okay,
thanks
keep
for
going.
having me on. Thank you so much.
Good going. Give Nicole the real insights. Don't leave anything out.
Okay.
Okay.
We will do that.
Okay, thanks.
Nicole, how much longer do we want to go? Like keep it to what, an hour?
I have no idea. As long as you want to go, lady.
Okay. Gosh, have we already been on? Like, well, we started late. Let's say, what time did we start? 12:30?
About an hour and a half, I think we've been on.
About an hour and a half. Okay. I can speed this up. Maybe
Okay.
we keep this to 2 hours. You know, I mean, last night's panel, there was so much. I know people will sit through nearly 3 hours, but you know, people might say with this too, you know, I apologize to everyone who goes, well, there's nothing new here. You guys, I didn't expect major revelations from Jim. I mean, there were revelations in what I've been sharing and a few more, but it's just for everyone to understand the SSCI report and what's going on with it. And, you know, I had the conversation. I'm going to share what I found, even if it's not anything, you know, sorry, you guys, it's not a bombshell. You know, I don't think Jim is going to give me a bombshell. I think, you know, it ain't going to happen that way. I'd love if he did.
Yeah,
I'm open to
it. Trickle down bomb.
Please, Jim, you know, I'm open to it. But you know, but there, you know, but there's little explosions in here, little ones tucked in. Okay, so here we go. So I said, any of you, you know, look at my nose, on the, you know, getting anything out of this, that's where I said the vault program was kind of the only thing. I said, how much will come back to you guys? His exact words, that's question number 4. How much will come back to the TTSA? And he said, none. I said, will anything come back to you? He said, none, absolutely not. In other words, there's no requirement. They don't expect it. It would be outside of the channel of how this is supposed to happen, outside of the official channel. So he said, absolutely not. Now, may they hear some things behind the scenes? He says, we have friends, you know, but he said, is there anything official? Or is the Senate required to share anything with them? He said, none, absolutely not. He emphasized that. So, okay. But then he went on to later, he said, we're hoping they'll use our vault program, you know. So there you go. There was a lot of effort on To the Stars, like I said, to do this. That's, again, the request for proposal thing I already talked about there, that they would have to submit. Okay. He said, let me see if I can get this right. I said, won't the committee report, Senate, you know, et cetera, come up? Okay, so I brought this up on the panel last night because I knew I was thinking of the Wilson document when I said this. I could not say that because I've already had a previous 43-minute conversation with Jim specifically about that. And I thought he'll say, I can't comment on that. Don't go there again. You know, that I don't want to push my luck, but I worded it like the implications. Okay. And I brought this up last night. Won't the committee report Senate just come up on the SAPs and USAPs as being where the control goes? And besides the stovepipe situation, And is there a way around this? What if it goes into corporate hands, all that? I shared that last night. So I almost feel like I don't want to go over it all again right now. I went into that last night. But here's some quotes from him. Yes, he said, if something is illegal, because Danny had brought this up, Danny Silva, okay, had brought this up. If, you know, something is illegal and therefore they, you know, it should be something that, and Joe was bringing this up too.
What did they call it last night? Illegal legality? Was
Yeah,
that the term phrase they
yeah,
used?
I think did
Or
Bob
an
McGuire,
illegal
I think Bob
legality. Yeah.
McGuire bring that up, I think. So, and yes, at the point that there's an absolute illegal thing, but he said the government part and even the USAPs, that's all legal, you know. That's Bob clarified that last night, Bob McGuire. So again, people listened to last night. I don't want to have to repeat it now, but Bob McGuire, you know, clarified that. And yeah, there's that, like you said, illegal legality, you know, but the USAPs, and the, you know, so this is how it's broken in and compartmentalized and ends up being fed to contractors who then become private individuals. And yes, there might be security clearances for the contractors because they have to have the security contracts to work on this, but there is a level of disconnect now. But even if something on the private or on the government end is illegal, therefore those security oaths and stuff don't apply, and that is true. Yeah. Okay, Bob clarified last night. Okay,
and
he said,
that's a nice loophole for us to pay attention to. I think that's our loophole.
He said, here's the good news, at least on what's going on with the SSCI so far. He said, okay, you know, that's all problematic, okay, at the part that it goes private, and if there is something in fact illegal. But he said, if they come across as the committee something that they think is illegal, they can make an issue of it, the task force, and certainly the Senate. The task force, well, they will just report. They just have to report findings. But he said the Senate, oh yeah, you know, yeah. And he said they've already made it clear that, you know, that's part of what they want to discover. They haven't been briefed. What's happening under our noses? We should be being briefed on this. And is this all above board? You know, and so now how much of that will remain in an unclassified portion? Probably not. It would start an investigation, and there's a, you know, the process is in place. But Jim said, quoting him, here's the good news on that. Anything that can be shared that's unclassified is supposed to be being shared. Okay, the senators have said that. He said you can't ignore it. It's extremely difficult. The agencies cannot hide if they've done something, like you said, illegal legality or whatever, you know. Okay, because they can't ignore it from the Director of National Intelligence, so the DNI office. Okay, the DNI task force and stuff, he said they cannot, you know, the agencies cannot ignore their request. He said, oh, it says my connection's unstable. Can everybody hear me okay, I hope?
I can still hear you. It did get a bit choppy for a second.
Okay.
And
okay.
I will throw in, you know, with us talking about the DNI and them having so much power, they are going to be the people that don't hear, you don't have the right to know. They can't hear that phrase. Nobody can pull that card on them.
They can't, exactly. Thank you. That's exactly what Jim said. Thank you. That's exactly what he said. He said, because that gets on the next thing. He said the DNI is pushing it, and the DNI have the pool to stop that. They cannot be told. They cannot be told you can't hear this. Now it can go into the classified annex part and not be part of the public part. You know, let's just hope this whole thing doesn't go into the classified, right? You know, I mean, that's what we're at risk of. But he said the senators have a goal here. They want to get this out. They want to appear transparent about it. you know.
Mhm.
And he said, those might be things dealing with foreign enemies and stuff that can't be made public to go in their hands. But he said, you know, otherwise it's supposed to be in there. And he said, again, like you just brought up, the DNI, you cannot turn them down on this. That's why the task force has gone to them, because they have that authority. And that was real
Awesome.
smart. I think we thank Chris Mellon for that one, or the
Yeah, I
senators.
think
Or
so. I think so.
I have the feeling like, this is just me. This is just me. Like To the Stars and Chris and these guys working with the Navy, everything, they thought this all through and gave it to the senators how to do it. Like he said, Chris wrote this, the language. I think they said, this is how you can do this.
Right.
And
I think so too.
Gave
I
them a
agree
path
with
of
you.
action. I really do.
And just to hit on another topic from the panel, I think it was brought up, like, what is it going to take? Is it for these people to be able to come forward and talk? Is it going to be some form of immunity? And that was kind of clarified with the legality section of everything. But what you're talking about right here, this support from senators and their drive to want to get answers and see this through, right there's our answer. If we in the community want to do our part with this, guess what we got to do? We got to start writing every single senator that we can get a letter to.
That's true. I didn't bring that up with him or anything, and he didn't bring it up, but I agree with you. I agree with you.
I mean,
you know,
that's
well, he
how
said,
citizens
this
take
is the
action.
thing, but I think we're beyond that. It's gone to
Mhm.
Congress. They decide on it, he said, in August. And that gets into, let me see if I have that here. If not, I'll just get into it right now. I don't think I have any more notes on it. He said, yes, he said, it goes to them, but he said, we really think, I said, how much do you guys think this is going to go through? He said, well, traditionally, by the time it gets into this report from the Senate subcommittee, Congress pretty much lines it through. He said, he said, I doubt the whole thing will get X'd out. He said, they could change a thing here or there, wording, verbiage, or a part of it, but he said, we actually think they're going to add to it. So you guys, that's a news takeaway. That's a huge, and I said this last night on the panel, that I was like, can I quote you on that? That he said, we actually think they're going to add to it. They tend to add, Congress says, well, if we're going to do this, it also needs to be this, this, and this, and we want this, like Congress will come back with, maybe their wish list part of it. He said, if it goes through as those, what I read, 8 or the 9 things that they specifically list in the report, he said, yeah, we expect it'll go through. There could be some minor changes, but he said, if anything, we think the changes will be additions and more complexity to it.
Right.
So,
and
anyways,
I can follow suit with that, because I mean, just the 1 through 8, all those statistical gathering things that they want, like from NASA and the geometric things. I don't have it in front of me anymore. But all of those things, like you mentioned earlier, this 180-day report that we're supposed to get is pretty much a summary. So if they go in and get this report and they think NASA has more to contribute, then that's when they're going to add that in. And they're going to say, NASA, give us the goods from the space station. We know there's something up there. You left all that stuff out,
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, Jim said this is just the initial, and he said, and that may be, Congress may give it more time, may change it from 180 days to more time. But he said, if they go with, let's just get the initial on what's in the stovepipes, in the 180 days. So, and then he said, then comes the next level, because he said, then there'll be, then there's a decision on based upon the initial findings. Okay, do we start getting weekly reports, monthly reports, yearly reports? What kind of additional digging goes on with the DNI? So and the task force. And he said, here's if I can find this quote. He says, we're going to keep pressure on them. He said, we're going to keep pressure on I'm going to quote him, we're going to keep pressure on the gray hairs. So on the gray hairs, we're going to keep pressure on them. I said, are you guys done? You've done your briefing? And he said, oh, hell no. He said, we're done for now till we find out that if the report gets initiated, goes into effect, and what's found and how much we get to hear about that. But he said it's supposed to be public. He said, based upon what's made public, he said, the senators know we're coming back. We're meeting with them. You know, he said, we're putting pressure on the gray hairs to say, that's not all of it. You got to go deeper. You know, what happens next? And he said, we're going to keep pushing this for the next levels. That's their goal. And he says, Chris is not going to take no for an answer. Okay. He made that very
good,
clear.
good.
He says, we're following, he added this, we're following the data and the science. He said, you know, and he kept talking about, in the report, and when it goes through Congress and gets changed, so the initial bill, what gets entered into the security bill, he said, will be this, you know, hopefully, you know, the task force, what their purview is, you know, what they have to do, and what they're going to accomplish in a 180-day report, if Congress agrees on a 180-day report or gives them more or less time. He said it won't be less, it's likely to be more. But anyway, so, but it's like, okay, so what, and then what is the scope of that? What is, you know, it'll be defined better with the scope of exactly what they're looking for, you know. But he said, make no mistake that this is not just the foreign adversary, meaning here on earth thing. Okay. He said, the senators are very clear. We briefed them. This is clearly about, you know, no one's talking about extraterrestrial presence, but it's clearly about the technology, what's behind it. So that gets into that,
Right.
and the amount of it, and yeah, you know, that there have been crash retrievals and other things. He said they're not going to go that deep initially, but he said we're planning to keep on until they go that deep. You know, that's
Here, just a
their
skeptical
goal.
question.
Yeah. Yes.
Just
Absolutely.
a skeptical question here, real quick for you. Do you think we're finally going to get our answers to Roswell with this?
Who knows? I asked Jim those things because that was the other part. Yes, I did get into how much historical data, you know, and he said initially he said it's what's in the stovepipes, what, you know, how much is known by you guys? Do you have committees and reports, and so that historical data as far as what if you guys have looked at this and have, you know, whatever. Okay. But I said, what about the historical data that gets into, like we were discussing earlier, how much the FBI knew, and, you know, how much the Navy past crashes, past sighting reports, additional footage, you know, all those things. And I said, and the crash retrievals, you know, like case in point, Roswell, you know. And he said, eventually, he said, it depends on what the committee finds in that initial, like how far, if once, because he said, again, the DNI requesting this, like we were just saying, they can't be turned down. And he said, they have the pool. That's why this went to them, because they have the pool, and they say, you got to give it to us. And and they said, depends on how much is coughed up and given to them. If that's given them to the outset, then they have that, and that becomes part of it. But he said he doesn't expect the 180-day report to go that deep. He said it could, but he said, but then they come back with, okay, here's level one. Now they got to know what each committee in the stovepipe, what each thing, what the different reports actually have in them. Then you go with the next timeline, you know, the next 180-day report, or the next whatever, you know. And he said they have every intention on keeping at it. They want to say, you know, they want to do the initial investigation, then get into what's actually known, how much is known, how deep. I also asked him, I said, okay, your thing was the money. Okay. You know, we're black projects and money. Okay. I said, what if they get into the money allocation from the SAPs and the USAPs? And he said, well, that is all legal, and there's a, you know, process for that. And I said, will they be looking at how much money is channeled into these programs? He said, not initially. He said, I don't think that's part of the initial. I don't think they're going to have to ask for that. But he said, when they ask for that, it has to be coughed up.
Right.
You know, and I said, because, you know, I brought up the infamous, you know, follow the money trail. You know, it's all about where the money went. And I said, are they going to, have a realization of how much money has gone into all this, because it's mind-boggling.
It is, and
It's
you know,
mind-boggling. I mean,
like you say,
it's got to be
follow the
huge.
money.
I mean, we're talking just when you get into the existence, and him and I kind of discussed some of this, like underground installations or reverse engineering programs, or crash retrieval programs, and oversights and committees and technology development, whatever. I said, there's got to be, and how much of that money came from the government? Well, a lot of it, and he agrees. And he says, this is the kind of stuff that drives Chris crazy,
Yeah.
and they said, look, we want, To the Stars wants to know, he said, the senators want to know. So he said, but that's later. That's part of the later stuff that comes up.
Right.
So let me just see if I covered most of my questions. I talked about, that it went into private industry and government contractors. Does this have any power over them? And again, there was a lot of talk between us. There's a little disconnect there in that they may not have power over the private, but they do if it's with the oversight of the USAP. So that's where they can get to the data. But at the point that it goes completely private, and we talked about shell companies and burying it in those shell companies. And Bob talked about that on the panel last night and said it absolutely happens. Bob admitted to being, not relating to this subject matter, but in other incidences, being a part of that. And so I hope that they'll get into that in their interview, his interview with Grant tonight. But that is one of the ways that they hide the money in the money trail, and that they hide these projects. Now, again, he said they could eventually get into digging that deep, but he said, unfortunately, that's just way down the road.
Right.
Okay, for now, let me see. That's all my questions were along that. I said the historical stuff. How much historical intel communications handled in the past? I said crash retrievals, Roswell, Blue Book, past committees, the past control groups. I was alluding to MJ12, but I didn't say it. Past control groups. And he mentioned, like I said, the Blue Book Condon Report and others, he said, well, they'll come across that in there probably. And he said they may later set a date to specifically look more in depth at one of those programs. Now they just want to know, like the initial report is which programs existed, kind of thing. Okay. I said, will they be asking how long this was known by each agency? How long have you known this? How long have you been looking into that? And he said, yeah, I suspect that they probably will. I don't remember his exact quote because I don't have it written down here.
Yeah.
But basically it was,
well, that
I
would
said,
be
well, I'm
interesting.
paraphrasing him. I'm saying it's an exact quote when I know, but other times I'm paraphrasing him. But basically, he did go on about that and say, yeah, he said they'll want to know, that'll be part of the report. How long have you known this? How long have you been doing it? How long has that been in existence? So, and he said, yeah, could it go way back? He said, depends on how deep they look and how much data they've got in the initial report. And then in additional, because he said the initial report is just step one, it'll keep going. At least that's the intention, certainly by To the Stars, and the intention by the senators. So there you go.
Did he happen to mention anything? I know we're talking about, our own government entities here, but anytime you're talking about intelligence agencies, we know they operate in foreign countries as well.
Yes, yeah. He said he suspected some foreign intelligence will come into this for sure. And he said there's been, relationships, and so he said, we did talk about, or at least he, brought it up that he suspects that that's some of the information that they will also come across. Yes.
Yeah, because we live in our own little bubble here in the States sometimes, and we forget that there's some like awesome ufology happening
and him and I talked about that just a little bit. There's a lot of reason to believe in the research that foreign governments and foreign militaries, there's known stuff like the committee report and, blah, 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 blah. You can go on and on. Yeah. But so, we know that foreign governments have looked into this, and foreign agencies, but even foreign militaries get into, crash retrievals, like famous incident in Brazil.
So
and all
he
that,
believes other countries
and
Does he believe
Brazil,
other
Peru,
countries
you know.
are making a push like this? I mean, we know other countries have talked about
Well, well, in the past, we didn't bring it up
have.
this time. We didn't bring it up this time, but in the past, he said we know some foreign governments are way ahead of us as far as pushing for this and coming out and admitting they have stuff. That's one of the things I think that probably came up. I'm trying to think if he said this to me. You guys, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and suggest that in their meetings with the senators that came up, you know, and foreign governments are on the front on this, and so the senators they're being mad why they weren't briefed. And it's like, look, the foreign governments are talking about this. Their people know. How come we don't? Maybe that's part of their being mad and wanting to pursue this.
Well,
That's a far reach. Jim and I did not get into that, at least not in this conversation. I can't remember. I'm going to be honest with everyone about whether he said that in the past one, but I have a sneak. Come on, of course that'd be discussed. I think that's a given.
Yeah, I bring this up because
he said. He said, "Oh, no, that was something else." He was. I was talking about the shell companies. He says some of that's done overseas, because I have this comment about overseas here that I wrote down from him. He said a lot of that's done overseas, but he says, you know, you get into espionage. That's espionage at that point that's going on. And he said, yeah, it goes on. And he said, not all of it's legal, you know, and you know, sometimes I think he holds back because, you know, there's parts he knows he can't talk about, obviously.
Right. Well, and that kind of talk does spin it out into the ultra conspiracy realm of black ops, and, you know, we're never going to find out details on that. But we do know CIA, they have shell companies.
We know that.
Yeah, it's made the news.
And that they're done overseas, and the espionage is involved. Yeah, we know that. So, you know, he was like telling me what I already knew, you know. I guess that's it. Joe Murphy had asked me beforehand to ask him about slide 9 of Chris's presentation, which gets into those various categories of what's known about the ETs. Yeah, we did talk. We didn't mention the slide 9 specifically, but that kind of stuff came up as far as to the stars and their knowledge. Sorry, I'm trying to hang up my phone wherever it is. You know what? Sorry about that, you guys. I'm just going to ignore it because it's buried.
It'll stop eventually.
There it is. There we go. It was buried under my paperwork. I go, that's loud. It must be right in front of me. Okay, so there we go. And so there you go. It's, what was I just saying? Yes. Sorry, lost my train of thought. What was I just saying, Nicole?
Oh, you were talking about Joe's question to you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, about those. So, but I didn't necessarily have to bring that up. He talked about what To the Stars really know about this, and it got into those things. So even though I didn't bring it up, and he didn't mention slide 9, he got into those things listed there. I don't have it in front of me, you guys. I'm so sorry. Joe has.
Well, Melinda, Joe's gonna want to interview you. Joe's gonna want to interview you himself anyways.
About
so
that,
you
yeah. And Joe, when you listen to this, or if you're listening now, you can write down in comments on the posting of this or something about what those items are. And again, if you do a blog on your site, you can. Okay. When I say Joe, I mean Joe Mercer for people listening. I figured everybody by this time knows who I mean. We're just throwing out names and stuff. Y'all know where everybody is. Okay. And if you don't, do some research. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So I said, okay, so that's it. I didn't really get to ask him. I just thought it interesting that he brought up some of those very kinds of points. And that is something that these guys know. Well, we knew that from slide 9 that they knew it, but his admitting that, you know, that they absolutely know. For things like the whole consciousness connection to the subject matter, as an example. And can the ETs control someone's mind or something like that? These, they know that that's there. Come on, you guys, look at these people's background, the work they've done, the work that
I know.
was done with abductees and experiencers and contactees since 85 till now. It was stated in their original meeting minutes from 85. They were interested in the technology and abductions, so you go to that and it's like, yeah, I've known that these guys have looked into this. It was just interesting without my having to bring it up. He went there in our conversation. He completely went there. Okay. I guess that's it. I did ask him just a separate issue about his had met Tom. This was one place where he was a little more guarded, but he did say the info in Tom's book that him and he said guys from the community. I took that to mean the intelligence community, but he said guys from the community were wanting to know what Tom knew about his book and what had happened at his meeting at the aerospace company when he went to the company picnic and was approached by individuals and all that. And he said, so him and some folks went and met Tom in a hotel room, and that original story, it sounds to me from what Jim said that was like a year later. I'd heard rumor, I'd never heard Jim say this to me about how he met Tom DeLonge, but there was stuff floating in the community, so I ran some of that by him and he clarified. There were parts there where he was saying, I can tell you this, but I can't get into it, so there were little things there. His past friendships with certain people involved. He had already told me he's known John Alexander for years. He offered up that he's known Hal for years, which I have to ask him more about. So he has a background with some of these guys. This goes into, I do not know if Jim was ever part of the working group at any point.
Right.
I now, after our conversation, suspect that he was. I maybe already suspected it, but now, he is, and that he's heading up to the stars. But it's like he just showed up and no Tom, and Tom wanted to be involved, and everyone else was okay with it. Right. No, you guys, he has a past history with these people, right, and a long history with these people. So does that allude to there being something more deliberate with how that came about? I'm going to tell you what Melinda thinks is yes. Has Jim ever said that? No. But he was very guarded in his responses to me about that history. I'll say that.
We do know of other players that skirt this group as well.
Oh yeah, Well, you go into you go into
every single,
Gary Nolan and Kit Green, and and he brings up those names. Yeah. He knows I know all that, so he throws names out right and left that he knows I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's he's not shy about discussing that with me. He's made it very clear. He knows that the research I've done and the background. He's done his homework on me. I've done a little bit of homework on him and asking someone I know that used to be with the CIA and a supervisor there.
Melinda, what did you say, since we did start this interview by talking about women and ufology a little bit?
Yes. Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that maybe that's a difference between women and men when we're interviewing or when we have a source? It's not just this like rapid fire, cold fish kind of relationship, question. You kind of, you get on this friend level with people, you talk to them, you end up knowing about their wives and their kids and their pets and all this thing. And, once you establish a relationship with a source like that, you almost don't have to ask questions. You have these conversations, you get your answers through conversation. And if there's anything specific that you need to know, that's when you take it to them and you're like, all right, here's question time, and it's always like that. So I don't know. I think that's an angle that us ladies have.
Well, yes. And we discuss feelings. Grant left his camera on. I just saw that on screen.
Yeah, he did. That's okay though.
I just saw that. It was pretty funny. It's like, okay, So this may remain open. You know, you might be recording Grant's room.
I still have the power to hit that.
Okay, good,
Were
good,
we
good, good.
wanting to
Yeah,
wrap
once
up?
the
We got
meeting is
about
ended, it's
4
ended. I get how it
minutes.
works. I know. Once it's ended. Okay, everybody. So in conclusion, yeah, I mean, women, we're quick to discuss feelings, you know. Jim's very open with me. We discuss those kind of things. He's also a pro, and like Danny Sheehan tells me, never ever forget, you know.
I know. Every
You know, his
time I
background,
talk
and so he's a complete pro. You know, everybody knows that who talks to Kit Green or to Hal or to Eric Davis or whatever, you know. And I would expect even more so given Jim and his background and his level. Okay.
Absolutely.
I constantly question, this is just Melinda, you know, I constantly question, is this whole thing you know, for lack of better term, psyop? Is this all, he goes back with these guys, has this long history, isn't it convenient meeting Tom after that meeting, and Tom was approached? What if all this has been a little more orchestrated? Probably. Is it orchestrated to bring about disclosure? Maybe, you know, that's how it appears. They do want to get into technology development. Do they have something personally to gain from that? Yes. You know,
Yeah.
Is it rebirthing? Is it where now ATIP now, but I kept saying, is it rebirthing ATIP? And he made it very clear to me. ATIP's still going on. That's very clear. And he made that clear. We have many quotes from Lou Elizondo about that, but now you can quote Jim Semivan. Yes, it's still absolutely going on. You know, Lou left it, but it's, you know, going on. And Lou doesn't know what's going on with it now. He's, you know, not briefed on stuff currently. He said we have no responsibility on being briefed on it, but the Senate does. You know, so
right.
You know, but they do.
And
okay.
You know, that really does put it in perspective. There is so much back work that has gone into this. This isn't just, oh, hey, To the Stars is doing this.
Yeah.
You know, this is going back to Senator Harry Reid and the start of ATIP and Christopher Mellon being involved there.
Because you go into NIDS be getting BASS, and BASS be getting OSAP and ATIP, and
on and on. And
ATIP's gone on in the Pentagon, so it had some importance, but Bigelow not being involved in it anymore. And he said we would have to resubmit for involvement in a proposal. You know, request for proposal. So he said, that's what he said, you know. I guess I'm choosing to say I probably believe him about that, but could they want to become involved again? Do they want to, he's made it clear they want to develop technology and stuff. So, but I think they're also driven. I think all of them have personal experiences. That drives them. We know for sure that Jim does, and a few of the others, Eric Davis does, and others. So we go, okay, what if these guys have enough personal experience? I mean, obviously, the core of them that have been part of the working group going back to 85 and even prior, you know, have known so much about all this. They have a real desire to know. I think that's what drives them. And if they can also benefit from it at the same time, you know, so be it. But now, does that mean we believe everything they're saying? Are they holding back stuff? Absolutely. You know, they have their security oaths. They, you know, they're holding back on what, you know, on Wilson Davis, you know, they're holding back on that. And, but they've made that very clear. They have friends and people they know involved that are named in the notes. And, you know, he said it could be embarrassing for, this is what he said to me in the past, not this conversation, but in the 43-minute non-denial part of it was it could be embarrassing for them and career ruining and whatnot. So, you know, and so not only where they're, you know, so much they can say our security clearances, you know, if any, like he said, if any single thing in there is about something we know to be classified, if there's any single classified program or classified thing mentioned anywhere on that document, we can't address the entire document.
Right.
You know, he
and
made that very clear.
These are questions that I'll ask our friend Bob in a couple hours here.
Yeah.
So,
okay, good.
You know, I know that's one. I mean, I've been friends with Bob for a little while now and know him through my
I
friend
met
Dave.
him in February, but we've become, I think of him as, we met at a conference, but we had some really nice discussions. Very nice man. I like him tremendously, and I feel like we've become friends in a short period of time.
I know
Even those
he's
discussions were just
very.
over like 4 days of being in an event together.
It's so nice. Grant was like, get your questions ready. Get your questions ready for Bob. And I'm like, I just want him to talk. I just want to talk and he'll
Look who's
listen.
back.
He's
Well,
back.
and we're just ending.
Right to wrap up. I will say my last thing to end this. I want to say to all the lady researchers out there, of course, there are bad things that happen as well. We all come up against the jerks that, we argue with in a nice way. And we hear things like, oh, well, that's why you're single. We hear these dumb things. And, a part of like what you said is we have to insert ourselves in these situations and we have to make our voices heard. The other thing is there are women out there that don't talk about that kind of stuff and shut doors and just slam it shut. And, we in ufology, we really do need to be a girls club. In order for us to get a bigger seat at the table, we got to make room for ourselves. And I think we're doing
I like that. I'm going
in
to quote that. We got to make
bigger
room for
ways.
ourselves. I love that.
Hey, I'm a chef. I can set tables all day long and invite people to eat. So, but thank you so much, Melinda.
Well, with
and
Grant
thank you for
being there,
letting me
Grant,
continue.
thank you for letting me have a place at the table on your show and your podcast, and particularly that panel. Both you and Richard having me on there, I really, really appreciate it. And Nicole, what a wonderful pleasure to meet you and get to talk to you. Everybody, I apologize that my notes weren't more in order, but I'm proud of myself. Actually, all things considered, 6 hours of sleep, just back-to-back 2 days of, and I have another interview with Lorianne later today, not about any of this. That's going to be at 5 o'clock. Now, I don't want to compete with you guys. When are you guys talking to Bob?
At 4 o'clock your time.
4 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
For how long? Probably more than an hour.
It'll probably be an hour. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. It's like you.
Okay.
It's like that's the nice thing about doing podcasts rather than radio shows. You can just sort of let it go till it ends. You don't have
everybody, listen to what Bob has to say.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you got time at the end, Lorianne Jocelyn and I had a MILAB experience together here in Sedona. Jocelyn's family and myself and another friend. Another friend of ours, Jocelyn's family, me, there were 5 of us together, had a significant MILAB. Lorianne wants us to talk specifically about that event and what Jocelyn and her family remembers, what I remember. And so it's going to be meaty and deep dive into a MILAB event. But listen to Bob, that's more important.
Yep.
And this will get recorded, my thing with Lorianne, and you can always listen to it later.
Beautiful.
So I will share the panel, this talk now, Bob's talk, and my upcoming one from tonight. Eventually, over the next like 48 hours, or a couple of days, maybe a couple of days, they'll all be on my Facebook page. So
Beautiful.
Links can be found there. And anyone who's a member of the ATIP room, the Young Guns room, the Advanced Theoretical room, everything will end up going there too.
Beautiful.
And the women's page, the Women of Ufology page, I got to share it all there too.
I need to join that.
I forgot that part.
There you go. Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
You know what? Hey, Nicole, we're used to taking the back seat. That's got to change.
Right.
We got to demand we're at least in the passenger seat, if not driving. There you go.
I'd like to drive.
Beautiful.
All right.
The guys
Thank
get in
you
the back.
so much.
Okay. I'll send you the tape when it's done in a few hours, Melinda.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for
Beautiful.
listening to. And again, I want to apologize one last time for the rambling and not having my notes more together. There just wasn't the time, and I hope it made sense.
Thank you for giving us the big scoop. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The checks
Absolutely.
in the mail. The checks in the mail.
Oh God, if only.
Okay. Have a good one.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.